We discussed religion in government, which, you know, is quite an interesting discussion. Religion in government. And what we discussed was that how in a kind of strange way, religion is now the catalyst driving governments all over the world into a frenzy, which includes war. The hostile nature of the conflict in Iraq, you know, is really starting now to catch even more attention than it had because of the increasing numbers of Americans being killed to an alarming proportion, indicating that in some way these Iraqis who are really fighting for their country against a foreign invader are, you know, organized and reorganizing, and now actually they believe, as our side believes, fighting for their version of God. And that's what it is. It's everybody's version of God. Of course, their version of God doesn't agree with our version and with the Israeli version. And, you know, in our country, if your version doesn't agree with our version, then you become an enemy. And that's what happened. Now, as the plot thickens and as this drama plays itself out and continues, last week we found that the president, President Bush, dropped all of the reasons that we initially said were the purpose of the invasion of Iraq. You know, was supposed to be weapons of mass destruction and connections to Al-Qaeda and connections to the 9/11 thing. Well, those are gone now. Now, the new reason that was announced was to bring democracy to the Middle East. We invaded in order to bring democracy. Not unlike, you know, Hitler invaded to bring his form of democracy. But he also, the president also went on to say that this struggle, and this is what's ominous, would go on for decades. So you see what you and what your kids are in for. I might add that the hot news lately, and we were discussing it at dinner a few moments ago, and it could have terrible implications for young mothers and parents. The implications are that this government here is now pondering, and it's beyond that point, they're about ready to launch a new draft in which youngsters would be taken into the military. And the reason for that is that this country is not able to get either other countries or whomever to join them in sending kids to Iraq. But let me show you this so that we can look at it together. First of all, look at the change in policy. And as you can see, it's a democracy strategy. This came out of the United Kingdom on November the 8th. Bush announced a new policy which will no longer excuse or accommodate dictatorships in the Muslim world. You know, I mean, so here, this is an amazing thing. In other words, this is saying, unless your country does it the way we do it and the way we like it, we'll invade. Here's Washington. President George Bush on Thursday recast the argument for America's intervention in Iraq as part of a global democratic revolution, announcing a new policy which will no longer excuse or accommodate dictatorships in the Muslim world. So you can see the weapons and the Al-Qaeda and all of that stuff is gone. You know, now it's a whole new approach that says, hey, if you don't operate the way we operate, we're coming in and we're going to blow you out. And that, you know, if we look at this other analysis here in the next overhead, news and analysis, Bush vows decades of war for democracy in the Middle East. In a speech before the National Endowment for Democracy Thursday, President Bush portrayed the military occupation of Iraq as only the first stage in a U.S. crusade, keywords, a U.S. crusade for democracy in the region that will continue for decades to come. Well, decades are 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, you know, and obviously, if you go back and look at the last crusades was many, many decades ago, and here we are again. You know, it's like the wheel comes around and off we go with another crusade, and it's the same group. It's the Christians and the Muslims or the Arabs, and they're at each other's throats. But here now, the word and the gauntlet is thrown. It's not to stop them from attacking the World Trade Center or stop them from Al-Qaeda or weapons of mass destruction. They're all, you know, excuses that never existed anyhow. The idea is we don't like the way they operate, so we're going to fight with you, and it appears as if this is going to go on for decades to come. And you know, that in and of itself is frightening. The conflict, as we know, has begun. And it is one in which the American participant, Mr. Bush, says will go on for decades to come. And that means that terrorism, war, fighting of all kinds is anticipated to continue for many, many years. And the only thing beyond that which comes down from above that could stop it are people who are not glued to the fundamentalist religious cults that thrive on this stuff. If those people do something, who knows? But otherwise, this is what you're in for. This is the forecast as to what's going to happen. You can take that down. Now, of course, that kind of talk is what many fundamentalist Christians look forward to, because it signals the possibility of Armageddon. That's the magic word here. And Armageddon becomes almost a mystical type of panacea for Christians, because they realize that in spite of this terror that would be unleashed on the world as far as deaths and destruction and fire and so forth, but it would herald the return of Jesus Christ. And that's what they want. And, you know, whatever brings Jesus back, it's worth it. So if it has to be Armageddon, let's get on with it, you know. And of course, you know, having our president being one in this member as a fundamentalist Christian, and the General Boykin, who's his Undersecretary of Defense, who feels the same way, there are now powerful people in position who can dispatch rockets, missiles, atom bombs, and everything else to make this occur. So everything is in place for Armageddon to occur. We have fundamentalists of various religions claiming God is on their side. Not just over here. It's not just Bush. I mean, over on the other side, whether it be in Israel or in the Arab places, everybody's got God on their side, and everybody is ready to die in battle for the glory of God. At least they're ready to sacrifice their young people for this. So now the United States, being the most powerful combatant, has a born-again Christian as president who claims God is directing him. This, you know, we'll get to it, but what's so frightening about that is it actually fulfills something out of the book of Revelation that talks about this man of God that comes on the scene and really takes over. You know, a little further down the road, but it's there. And so we have the president, but in addition to that, we have this general who is the Undersecretary of Defense, General Boykin. And he claims that we're not in a battle with Osama or Saddam. We're in a battle against Satan. So everything is ready. And the first shots have already been fired. You know, I showed you last week a lot of people have made millions of dollars exploiting the fear of Armageddon, because it's a scary thing. There's a guy named Hal Lindsey. And Hal Lindsey made millions of dollars selling a book called The Late Great Planet Earth. Jack Van Impe is another guy who's on television weekly with his wife, and he interprets the book of Revelation. And, you know, Jack, I would assume, is getting his, suit pressed now so he can have his meeting with Jesus, because he's been thriving on this Armageddon stuff for years. Never has it come to a point where it looked like it was a distinct possibility as it is now. But the rest of us are looking with our mouths open and looking at each other and saying, how did this get out of control? I mean, what happened here? I mean, in the space of a couple of years, we came from the worst thing that was happening in the country was the president was having an affair with some girl. That was big time bad stuff. And now we realize, come on, let's have it again. Move her in the whole bit. Because what in the world happened here? It's almost, you wake up every day wondering if this next shoe has dropped. Has the next bomb gone off? What in the world happened in a couple of years that has caused this nightmare that we're now being dragged into? And more importantly, what can be done to stop these people? How can they be stopped? Who can stop the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jews who are dragging the rest of us into this extremely violent existence and threat? Now, many people who are in the born-again side, on the Jesus side, are totally in support of war and things like that, because they look to Armageddon. Many others who are on the spiritual side, if you would use that term, they're called New Age people. They're looking to the sky. They're looking to activity in the universe. They're calling down the light to do something to stop religious fanatics from destroying God's creation, which is Mother Earth. I mean, because they say, what else can be done? Yesterday, we had a meditation here, and it was done because at the same time, people from all around the world were meditating in something that an astrologer has termed the harmonic concordance, an eclipse of the moon taking place while at the same time celestial bodies lined up to form what we know as the Star of David. There were 6 celestial bodies that aligned them. I'll show you. This is the Star of David. I refer to it as the Star of Delta, but anyhow, you had 6 celestial bodies lined up at points that formed the star, and so everybody said, oh, this must be something. Well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Who knows? I mean, I'm not one to turn my back on it, because I have been speaking about the catalyst for change coming from electromagnetism, which is the universe. It's what we exist on, what we thrive on as electro-persons. If we look at overhead 5, we'll see, you can take a look at the star, and then we look at overhead 5, and you'll see how these celestial bodies lined up. It's a little bit off kilter, but you can get the pretty good idea. You see the delta here, and you see the delta there, and it gave a pretty close resemblance to that star, which religiously is called the Star of David. At the 6 points are the Sun, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Chiron, and the Moon. Now, here's a uncanny but true problem with this. The people who assemble in meditation so as to be in harmony with celestial bodies are referred to as New Age kooks. far out people. They're crazy. They're nuts. See? But what are they doing? They're in a room and they're meditating and they're saying Om or having New Age music or something, and they're nuts. The people, on the other hand, who cheer on this killing and slaughtering of men, women, and children, animals, buildings, and nature of all kinds, they're the mainstream. They're the sane ones. They're okay. They salute, shoot, die, bury kids. You know, that's okay. And to me, it's a struggle to try to bring myself to grips with, you know, we really are. I mean, who's the doctors in this insane asylum, and who are the patients? Or are the patients running the asylum? Because when you're sitting peacefully and trying to flow in harmony with nature and calling down life from God to be healing, and that's considered crazy, and yet when you stand up and wave flags and cheer on people killing each other, and that's supposed to be sane, it seems as though it's a little bit backwards. Well, it's a lot backwards, but that's exactly where the culture is. The people who die, well, they have to be sacrificed for the good of our way, no matter where our way happens to originate. But the people who cheer on the killing and who march with this type of mentality, they get dressed up every Sunday and they go to church. They got suits and ties and fancy dresses and little American flags on their lapel. So how are these political and military religious fanatics who are trying to arrange Armageddon dealt with? How can they be stopped? And you can take that down. The people in the United States, and when I was younger, I often wondered, I'd hear all these terrible stories about Hitler, and I'd say, how could the people just not do anything? How could they must have known this stuff was going on, so how could they just allow it to happen? Well, now I know. I almost missed it. Now I know. They know the leaders are doing bad things. We know the leaders are doing bad things. We know it. Even if we're the political party, we know it's bad. But we just go on about our business, because what can you do? Nobody wants to take a chance of getting into trouble or have the FBI coming, so you do. We have the FBI, they had the Gestapo. What's the same kind of stuff? But see, that's why it was so wonderful that the worldwide meditation took place. I don't know whether it did anything. Doesn't make any difference. It certainly was a good thing to do. It's much better than killing people. See, this meditation calls upon God, whatever your interpretation of God is, calls upon Christ, whatever that is, to bring the power of the universe down on the heads of violent people who kill in the name of God. You know, they cannot make speeches, well, God wants us to do this and all this kind of business. Now, the Armageddon that these people are trying to ignite is part of the book of Revelation. And we discussed part of it last week. Now here's the thing that you have to keep in mind. The book of Revelation and the entire Bible is what? It's Greek mythology. That's what it is. The Bible is not Hebrew, neither in the Old Testament or the New Testament. It's Greek mythology. It was written by people of Hebrew heritage who had come into Greece and were known as Hellenists. Hellenists, Hellenists. But they were of Greek background and Greek literature, and they wrote these stories. They're Greek mythology. The book of Revelation is Greek mythology. if you read the book of Revelation, you'll come to the conclusion that somebody just wrote down their worst nightmare. 7-headed beast with 10 horns, and a woman with stars in her head, and blood, all this kind. And yet this is the book that the Christian fundamentalists take literally. And as a result, they draw the rest of us into their own religious nightmare. That's what it is. Over 300 young American men and women died for the same thing that thousands upon thousands of young men and women died in Vietnam for. Nothing. It was because, in this particular case especially, people take the book of Revelation literally. When they do that, they get caught up in the idea that there has to be an Armageddon. There has to be a war with the evil ones, who in this case are the Muslims, according to our government. And when we win that war, no matter how much blood flows, Jesus Christ will then come back to reign for 1,000 years. But the war of Armageddon has to take place. The president knows that, his generals know that, and that is why it is so dangerous to have religious people in government. So terribly dangerous, and that's why the people who put this country together said they have to separate this stuff. If you start taking the Bible literally, you're going to subject the people of the United States to these terrible wars in order to get Jesus back, and you're going to think you're blessed that God has ordained you to do this, that Jesus spoke to me and all this. I had a word of knowledge and all this crazy stuff. The book of Revelation is a book of very strange symbols, and they are written from another dimension. They're written from the same dimension that you visit when you go to sleep at night, and you put your body to sleep, and you get out of your body, and you go off into that dimension. That's where that stuff came from. It is nothing that can be taken literally. It is something that cannot be understood by the human mind, and yet these religious fundamentalists would have you believe that they know what the book of Revelation is all about. They don't, because it can't be known. The very fact that these people are building themselves up for war tells you that they do not know and are going against the very Bible that they claim to love. There's a very clear instruction in the Bible concerning reading it. And also it specifies what will happen if you take this stuff literally. And now you take the fact the president, the other members of government, the attorney general, all these born-again Christians, General Boykin, and all these people who are taking this stuff literally, and the killing that's going on now. And then look at overhead 6 here, this next one, and look what the scripture says, 2 Corinthians. Who has also made us able ministers of the New Testament, not of the letter, not literal, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Not of the visible, but of the invisible. For the letter kills. When you act on it, it makes you feel, I know what we're supposed to do. And then I'm reading mythology literally, and I am set to attack, to make something occur that I think is going to happen on the outside, when this entire thing is written really to that invisible one inside of you. The letter kills, and we are ministers of the Testament, not of the letter, not to be taken literally at all. Nothing in that Bible should be read literally. Nothing in, I'll say something else. I mean, nothing in that Bible ever happened. There was no Exodus. There was no crucifixion. There was no crossing of the Red Sea. But there is. These are real things that happen inside of all life. But we have made it into an adventure story of bizarre proportions and have totally, set the world up for a tremendous fall because of misinterpreting it. But these instructions are fundamental whenever you approach symbolic literature. You cannot read literature of this type literally, especially ancient Greek symbolic literature. You have to approach it from the same standpoint of what it means, not in the realm of the physical. In other words, not what does it mean to the world, what does it mean to my family, and what does it mean in the realm of the non-physical. So, well, I don't, that's exactly it. It is something that is between the person inside of your body that operates the body and the invisible ones above. It comes from the invisible ones above to the invisible one inside of you, who you really are. You say, well, I don't know, sir, if I can understand that. You can't. Book of Revelation talks about someone riding across the clouds on a white horse. And Christians have taken that mythological symbol literally and anticipate that Jesus Christ will return to the earth riding a white horse through the sky. There are others in the fundamentalist ranks who'll take some of the book of Revelation literally and then some of it symbolically. How do you do that? I mean, if you go sit down and read a story, Mickey Mouse or something in Disney, and say, well, this, I know this is, but this makes sense here, this part, you can't. It's either written symbolically or it's written literally. If somebody can show you have one degree, one bit of evidence of anything happening in the Bible historically, fine, but none. Nothing ever did. I don't have it with me, but we have documentation from the University of Tel Aviv, in Tel Aviv, Israel, that after 200 years of careful exploration throughout the deserts, not one thing has ever been proven to have existed. Joshua didn't make the walls in Jericho fall down because they're still standing up. Let me tell you, when you are reading a book and it has angels throwing things down on the earth, a woman with stars sticking out of her head, a seven-headed beast with 10 horns, a beast with 666 written on his forehead, you can be sure you have a book of symbols, and those symbols are to be energies for the invisible you, not the visible you. But the leaders of the world have chosen to take mythology such as this literally. And people have been slaughtered for thousands of years because of this religious insanity. And that's what it is. Whether they were burning people at the stake or running Galileo out of town because he told them the truth, all this nightmare by these wacky people, right up to the present day when they're taking little children behind the altars to sexually abuse them. These are crazy people. And yet, they're the mainstream. You come in and meditate, you're nuts. Religion has become the most violent evil force on planet Earth. If there was ever an Antichrist, if there was ever a Satan, it is religion. It has hurt more people than any other force which has ever been known to exist. There is a physical, and you can look at yourself, and you can look at your hand, and you can look at your arm and say, yes, I see it, that's a physical. But there is a non-physical. Because as you look at your hand and your arm and you turn it, you realize that something somewhere has to be deciding to turn that thing. It didn't turn on its own. Someone has to be turning it. That's the non-physical. Someone turns it, Someone turns it, and someone says, I don't want to turn it anymore. Something invisible makes the decision. That's the non-physical. If the non-physical was not in the physical, which is you, then the physical, you, would be on the floor like so much debris. But because the non-physical you is inside of the physical you, then you are a human being and highly prized and treasured. So the book of Revelation was not written for the physical you, but for the non-physical you. And the non-physical you has been inside of that body waiting and waiting and waiting to hear and understand communication and direction from your true home, from your true family. I mean, think of yourself. The person that turns that arm, where did that person come from? Who is that person's true family? Not the physical body. I'm talking about the person inside who operated. Where did that person, and who was that person waiting to hear from, to receive communication and instructions from? That's what the book of Revelation is for. Not for the arm that turns, but for the invisible person who turns it. The invisible ones who were with you before you arrived here. Who were with you in bodies and who will be with you again. The non-physical state. So strange things like those found in Revelation have to be considered as energies to the invisible. And when you pick up the book and read it, it's like somebody insane wrote it. You know, if you were to write these things and say, hey, look, I just wrote this, somebody would call a psychiatrist or else take you away and put you in a mental hospital. The reason that it appears the book of Revelation was written by somebody who is insane is because it's true. They are written, in reality, they are insane. They are not for what your family or your friends consider to be sanity. Sanity is listening to the president, listening to the government, listening to the teacher, listening to the officers, the police, listening to the doctors, listening to all of these people. That's sanity. Okay. Insanity is listening to something outside of this realm that doesn't exist. But that's why they all crowd into the churches every Sunday. And they sing songs. Because they're trying to also listen to something that doesn't exist. But at the same time, they want to listen to the government and to the doctors and to the lawyers and to all these people, the teachers. See, I'm going to listen to both of them, but you can't. You've got to listen to just that one. The abyss of the mind where there is nothing of the physical. Insanity. That's what the book of Revelation was written for. In writing the book of Revelation, and this is something that you should think about, as all scripture is written this way, mythologically, the techniques of deception are used. And it's most important. For those of you who do not dwell in the higher realms of the right side, you'll read these things and you'll be intentionally misled by the use of earthbound identities. Let me show you what I mean. Let's look at overhead 7 from the book of Revelation. Revelation 1:4. John, to the 7 churches which are in Asia, grace be unto you, and peace from him which is, and which was, and which is to come, and from the 7 spirits which are before his throne. That's what it says. Now, the first thing that a literal fundamentalist would do would be to see the words churches, because they thrive on that word. That's where the money is. You know, that's where the power and the control is. That's where the action is. Huh? Churches is where everybody comes together and they all stand up at the same time and they sit down at the same time and they do what they're told, see? So churches is a very important word there to the fundamentalists. Asia is another important one because they're literalizing. Huh? They're saying churches in Asia, not knowing that it's deception. There has nothing to do with churches in Asia. Okay. Whatever that person would then report concerning the book of Revelation would be useless because they're literalizing it about churches in Asia. That's the way they're coming from. Well, why would it be useless if they did that? Because the book of Revelation is a symbolic book written for the spirit or for the invisible. It has nothing to do with physical things. Here's my problem. You cannot take churches in Asia literally, and then take the same book with the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns and say, oh, well, that's symbolic. Right? Because how do you know then? The whole book is compromised. Who's to say which is literal and which is not literal? Not until you understand how these things were written that which is the literal appeared very normal, but hidden inside of this adventure story are coded words, if you would. There's nothing literal there. It just you can't write a book and say some of it is literal and some of it is symbolic. Each come against each other. Churches are literal, we know that. Asia is literal. So wipe them out. Don't even look at them. Has nothing to do with it. We can take 7 because we know of its symbolic value throughout the entire Bible. There's the word 7. 7 is very important. I don't take that because, well, 7's important to me, but churches in Asia aren't. No, it's because 7 carries itself not only through the Bible, but through all mythology and all of the other ancient spiritual books as a special number for a reason. Okay? It means something. 7. The 7 spirits which are before the throne, which you see in that last sentence, is a reference to this universal chakra or invisible systems that connect to the higher mind. Symbolically, the throne is the higher mind. And the 7 spirits is that chakra system which also does not exist. All right? It's a non-existing thing. It's a symbolic thing. It's like spirit. It's looking for a word to identify something that's there, but we don't quite know what can you call it. Huh? I don't know what to call it. It's a chakra. We call spirit. What is spirit? Well, it's an invisible thing. What's electromagnetism? So is chakra. The chakra is the resistors of the electromagnetism, because if the electromagnetism goes up the spine, if it doesn't have proper resistance through those nerve resistors, then it would impact on the brain and blow your head off. So it has to have resistance. And if it has the proper resistance, then that which is the higher from quote-unquote God can enter into you. So we have the word 7, we have the word spirits, we have the word chakra, and then we have the word throne. And the word throne, you defined it in ancient literatures, always means the mind, the higher mind. So you take something with a lot of gobbledygook about 7 churches in Asia, grace and peace from him that was, is, good, all this kind, and you barrel it down and say, the one point here that is coming is about this 7 chakra systems, 7 spirits, and the mind. Not a message to the physical, but to the non-physical. Those 7 spirits are energies that assist in controlling electric flow to the brain mind, and the throne is simply the higher mind or the right hemisphere of the brain. So in that particular verse, which if you were in a fundamentalist churches, spend 3 hours going over the 7 churches and what part of Asia and, well, all of this stuff. Okay? But you can discount everything except 7 spirits before the throne and come away with a knowledge that what is being referred to is the electrical reality within you that flows through you and must be resisted so that there is the proper flow to the brain mind. Let's real quick. What is being referred to is the electrical reality, 7 spirits, within you that flows through your body and must be resisted so that the proper flow hits the brain mind. That's why it's not just a coincidence that this chant of Om happens when there's meditation, because what is the law of electrical resistance? Oh. Spelled O-H-M, but no matter how you spell it, it still says O. And that's what this is about. So all of this then becomes deception to convey the truth about this resistant force to the electrical energy which drives itself up to the throne or to the brain mind. Now, as we look at the first 3 verses, the only pertinent one there, which we're going to come up here, let's go to the next. Okay, Revelation 1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things is at to come shortly to pass, and sent, signified by his angel unto his servant John. More stuff. Who bear record of the word of God and of the testimony of Jesus Christ and all things that he saw. You know. Blessed is he that reads and they that hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. Okay, so you can spend, you know, a whole fundamental Bible study on this kind of stuff and go researching all of this stuff, but look at the first 3 verses. The only pertinent thing here for a symbolic book really is the word angel. That word is in there. So right away it takes us out of even considering whether Jesus Christ was a person, about records, about who reads a book and all of this stuff. The word angel pops into the middle of this thing, and immediately we read, hey, wait a minute, if this stuff, the revelation, it came via photon. Because angel is actually angle of light, which is a messenger particle, which is photon. So now we've introduced here, if we want to take the religious words out of this thing, we'll say here that photon delivered this message, this invisible energy, this invisible electromagnetic energy, which is intelligent, delivered this message. Now, look at here. Can we take this literally? Good. Blessed is he that reads this book, keeps these things which are written, for the time is at hand. Let me tell you something. This was written around 2,000 years ago. The time was at hand 2,000 years ago. To people who read it 1,500 years ago, the time is at hand. To people who read it 1,000 years ago, the time is at hand. The people who read it 500 years ago, the time is at hand. See, The problem with when you take something like this, the book of Revelation, it depends when you live. And it can be anything you want it to be. You can make it into whatever you want it to be. If you want the city that burns down in an hour to be New York or the World Trade Center, why not? It's ours. It happened with us. But if you wanted it to be Berlin, it could have been. Second World War. You want it to be Tokyo, could have been that. You want it to be Rome, could be that. You want it to be Constantinople, all these other places. Anything you want. Depends on when you're alive. And everybody for thousands of years have interpreted the book of Revelation based on their existence. Who is 666? Depends. Nero? Caesar? They all qualify. Hitler? Mussolini? Now Saddam? Osama? So you can't do it. Because everybody has played the same game with this stuff. When I was a little kid, there used to be people standing on a corner in Newark where I lived. And they'd have a magazine. He's coming back soon. The time is at hand. It's always at hand. Because they didn't know how to read this. And so you go and you discount all of this stuff. And you throw away, get rid of all that stuff, and you come in and you say, there's something here of the invisible, and that's the angel. The only thing that's really relevant in these words is that the information that we are discussing in the book of Revelation came from Photon, a messenger particle, an angle of light, which causes an arc in the human brain mind, which we in religious terms call an archangle or an archangel. So the first four verses that we looked at served one purpose. Okay? What did they do in the book of Revelation? They told us that information contained that these presidents and generals are going to launch a war over, that this information came from a higher invisible light and was directed through the 7 invisible resistors inside of you to carry the message to the higher brain mind, the throne. That's all. But that's enough. That's the secret message. That's the message hidden in all of that stuff. That this information in this quote-unquote book came from Photon, a higher energy angle of light, to interact through the 7 resistors, nerve centers inside of you, and direct that energy up to the higher mind, throne mind, so you could access it via meditation. So here's what we've got, and you can think about it. You can take your choice. The book of Revelation is literal, beasts and all of that stuff, or it's not. And if it's not literal, then you have 2 choices more. One, it is the writings of a raving lunatic. Or 2, it is a coded message of extreme importance, written from the home base to those of us who have left the home base and taken on physical bodies. I can look right at each one of you, say you don't remember your home base, you don't remember where you came from before you arrived here, but you knew me, I knew you, blah, 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 in that electro-person realm. So I choose to believe the latter because of the fact that there is too much contained within the Bible and other ancient documents that is proven to be scientifically true. I mean, I can't say to you, listen, you got to have faith in this stuff, because I hate faith. I don't have faith. Faith is just something to have when you're not sure. That's a lot of baloney. Faith is just keeps you hooked up to the cult, and I don't want to get involved with that. And so we get rid of that. Now, you don't need faith, but I do need proof And I have to be able to prove to you, or else I have no business standing up here. Let me show you a couple of examples. Most of you have seen these before, but real quick. It was overhead mount. Genesis 2:21, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh. And that's when God ripped a rib out of Adam and made a woman. Meaning that, women were made out of spare ribs, which, that's not for me to say. You know what this is? What you're looking at in that sentence there convinces me that this Bible was written by a higher intelligence, an invisible intelligence, and is absolutely true. Because what you're looking is about an ionic bond. You spell that word I-O-N-I-C, an ionic bond. And an ionic bond is when you take an electron out of atom to create a positive ion. Then you place that in another atom to create a negative ion, resulting in positive, negative, male and female, yin and yang. In other words, all life began with the splitting of the atom, A-T-O-M, A-D-A-M. Well, do you know what? I can prove it. If this is literal, it's nonsense. But if it's not, and I know it's not, then I can prove it's true, because I understand the ionic bond that goes on between electrons and atoms. Now look at 33. And you shall hang up the veil under the taches. Exodus 26. You may bring in thither, yither, within the veil, the ark of the testimony, and the veil shall divide unto you between the holy place and the most holy. That's the construction of the temple. So you say, well, oh yes, it's very important. If the temple, if you have a finger, if you put it up on the side of your head, you say, what is that? That's the temple. And God says, the Bible says that you are the temple, and all this kind of business. What's so interesting about that, this is anatomically correct. In other words, this is a correct description of your head. The holy place is dura mater of the brain, which is the outer covering. The most holy place is pia mater, which is the innermost sensitive part of the brain. Okay? And the outer holy place, dura mater, and the most holy sensitive place, pia mater, are separated in your head by something called arachnoid, which is the web or the veil or the curtain. So the veil that divides the holy place and the most holy place is in your head. And this is a copy of what is in your head. So you have an anatomically correct description written 4,000 years ago of the construction of the human head. That makes me say this book has never been, properly understood. And once you properly understand it and you don't take it literally. Hey, here, look at this one. All that were numbered in the camp of Judah were 100,000, 80,000, and 6,400. What's good about it? The tribe of Judah was known as the tribe of light, the children of light. The number of people is 100,000. 80 is 4 times 20, okay? That's 180,000, and 6,000 is 186,400, which is the constant speed of light. So I know. See, if you take this stuff literally, then you've missed everything. And that's what these wild people who are fighting over Armageddon have done. Now let me show you something. Let me show you. I will show you this. This is a picture of the book of Genesis. Well, I got 5 minutes? Okay. This is the picture of the book of Genesis. This is Adam. And this is Eve. But in order to create this, they had to take a rib, which is an electron, out of Adam, which made atom a positive ion. You then put this electron into this atom, which made this atom Eve, which is a negative ion. You have positive, negative. Oh, and I love when they come together at marriage, the strong bonds of love. And then I read, the attraction between negative and positive ions results in strong bonds, called ionic bonds, that hold the ions together throughout. Let whatever God has put together, let no one break asunder. That's what Genesis is about. What it said to you was that all life began with the splitting of the atom. When you understand this stuff in its proper perspective, the proper way, then it really becomes magnificent.
Bill,
Yes?
I had something.
Yes.
When I look at that,
Mm-hmm. When you look at it?
what I like about that
Mhm.
is that it not only shows
Mm-hmm.
the transfer of an ion,
Mhm.
an ionic bond, but it also reminds me that there really is no positive energy, there really is no negative energy. The electromagnetic field is such that everything is to remain neutral. And when you have that shift,
Mm-hmm.
it will try to work itself out again so that it becomes neutral. And,
Good.
And I can see that there too.
Right, and what we add is positive and negative, or just words. But anyhow, that's where God makes the two one. So there's much more. But given that there are some very definite scientific facts written in the book thousands of years ago, testifies to the credibility of this being a scientific document written by a higher intelligence. So I would not consider the book of Revelation as the ravings of a lunatic, but rather as a continuation of the hidden message provided to all of us by our very origins in a realm of light. Having said that, there is a point where those who claim to teach the Bible and write about things such as Revelation prophecy make a very serious error. You can take that up. There is no part of the Bible that can be read like a novel. And you have had that happen to you right up to the point where you have the Christmas story that we're about to get inundated with. All of this stuff becomes an adventure story. Angels are singing on a hill. Sheep are watching, the shepherds are watching the sheep, and are in there, the little stall with all of the stuff. Whichever happened. It's a continuation. And the wicked King Herod said, I must kill that child. And so they took the child to Egypt. Oh, that's an exciting adventure story. And there was a young girl named Devaki. And Devaki sat in her parlor, and she had never had sexual intercourse, but an angel came to her and said, you're going to give birth to the Godhead. And she says, how can that be? She had a little baby. The little baby's name was Hare Krishna. And the wicked King Kansa said, I am going to kill that little baby because he is going to take over my kingdom. And so they took little Hare Krishna across the ice floes away from the wicked king. And there was beautiful Rhea. And Rhea was about to give birth to the baby whose name was Zeus. And the wicked king Kronos said, I am going to kill that little baby because he is going to take over my kingdom. And so they took little Zeus away to Crete. And yet every one of us are swearing this is our story, and it's true. And it's all talking about the child, which is the light part inside of you that must be taken away from the wicked king, which is the left side of the brain, the lower side, and steal away into the nothingness of meditation, where it is safe from the wickedness of the outside and those people who would come against it. So mythology cannot be read literally And I know I'm running out of time. I just want to show you a couple more things. Could you stay a few minutes more? You can't? Well, let me just show you real quick. It's found in all Greek mythology, and that's what the Bible is. Let me show you here. Here's a picture. Zeus. That's Zeus. That's the first one in the long line of gods. He's the youngest son of Titans, Cronus and Rhea. And as I said, when he was born, his king father, Kronos, wanted to kill him, and so they had to take him to Crete, which is a variation on the story about Jesus and Krishna. So in looking at the Bible, one doesn't have to read stories, but looks to see those points where deep scientific truths are covered and hidden, so they can then reveal those things which are to come. You can take that Zeus off. The book of Revelation has deep and important, mysterious truths hidden within the ramblings that we see. Angels and strange beasts and bizarre activity occurring on earth, and winding up with the glorious finale of we all live happily ever after. And so the writers and the Revelation wizards who interpret it for us have had such an influence on the president and the generals. They've taken this so deeply that in part, though you can't do this, they have championed it, and it becomes a crusade to get Jesus back.